I never expected my life to change the day Maria Redhawk moved into the apartment next door. But then again, I never expected a lot of things that happened that summer in Phoenix, the summer I learned that the smallest gestures of kindness could crack open the hardest shells we build around our hearts. My name is David Chen, and at 28, I'd become the kind of person who kept his head down, his door locked, and his heart carefully guarded. After my engagement fell apart 2 years earlier, I'd wrapped myself in a cocoon of routine, work at the tech startup, gym, Netflix, sleep, repeat. My apartment complex in downtown Phoenix was perfect for this lifestyle, anonymous, transient, a place where neighbors barely nodded at each other in the hallways. Then Maria arrived on a scorching Tuesday in June, carrying boxes that seemed too heavy for her slight frame. She was Apache, she told me later, from the White Mountain Apache tribe, with long black hair she wore in a traditional braid and eyes that held both ancient wisdom and youthful fire. She was 26, working 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school, and she had a smile that could light up the dimmest hallway. I helped her with those boxes that first day, mostly out of basic human decency, but also because something about her reminded me of what I'd lost, not my ex-fiancé, but something deeper. Hope, maybe. The belief that people could still surprise you in good ways. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but strong. "I'm Maria." "David," I replied, and that was supposed to be it. A neighborly exchange, nothing more. But Maria wasn't the type to let people disappear into their shells. Over the next few weeks, she'd knock on my door with traditional Apache fry bread she'd made, or she'd ask to borrow sugar, which I suspected she didn't really need, just to talk. She told me stories about growing up on the reservation, about her grandmother who taught her the old ways, about the challenges of straddling 2 worlds, the traditional and the modern. I found myself looking forward to these interruptions. My carefully constructed walls were developing cracks, and surprisingly, I didn't mind. Maria had this way of seeing through people's defenses without making them feel exposed. She was genuine in a world that had taught me to be guarded. One evening, about 6 weeks after she'd moved in, I was sitting on the apartment complex's small shared patio, reading a book I wasn't really absorbing, when Maria joined me. She'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital where she worked as a nursing assistant while studying for her RN certification. "You look tired," I said. "Tired is my natural state these days," she laughed, but there was a weariness in her eyes that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy, trying to do all this. My family thinks I should come back to the reservation, find a nice Apache man, settle down. They don't understand why I need to prove I can do this." "You're not crazy," I said. "You're brave. There's a difference." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt something shift in my chest, a feeling I'd thought was dead and buried. But I pushed it down. I wasn't ready. Maybe I'd never be ready. What I didn't know was that Maria was feeling the same confusion. She told me later that she'd started to care about me in ways that scared her. As a traditional Apache woman, she valued her heritage and her family's expectations. Getting involved with someone outside her culture, especially someone as emotionally unavailable as I was, seemed like a recipe for heartbreak. So we maintained this careful dance, friendly but not too friendly, close but not too close. Until the day everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon in late July when my childhood friend Rachel came to visit. Rachel and I had grown up together in California, and she was in Phoenix for a business conference. She was happily married with 2 kids, and when she arrived at my apartment, she greeted me the way she always did, with an enthusiastic hug and a kiss on the cheek. I didn't think anything of it. Rachel and I had always been affectionate in a completely platonic way. But as she pulled back, laughing about something her 5-year-old had said that morning, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Maria was coming up the stairs with groceries, and she'd frozen mid-step, watching us. The look on her face was complex, hurt, embarrassment, something that looked almost like betrayal. Our eyes met for just a second before she quickly looked away, hurrying toward her apartment with her bags. "Who's that?" Rachel asked, following my gaze. My neighbor, I said, and even as I said it, I realized how inadequate that word was. Maria had become so much more than a neighbor. Rachel, perceptive as always, raised an eyebrow. Your neighbor who you clearly have feelings for. It's complicated, I muttered. David, she said, her voice taking on that big sister tone she'd perfected over 30 years of friendship, you've been complicated for 2 years now. Maybe it's time to be simple again. After Rachel left for her hotel, I stood in my apartment, staring at the wall I shared with Maria's place. I could hear her moving around, the muffled sounds of her life continuing just feet away from mine. I thought about knocking on her door, but what would I say? That Rachel was just a friend? Would that make me sound presumptuous, assuming Maria even cared? But I did need to talk to her, I realized. Not because I owed her an explanation about Rachel, but because I owed her the truth about my feelings I'd been too afraid to acknowledge, let alone act on. I knocked on her door, my heart hammering in a way it hadn't in years. She opened it, her eyes red-rimmed, though she tried to hide it. Hey, she said, her voice carefully neutral. That was my friend Rachel, I blurted out. From childhood. She's married with kids. We're just friends. Maria's expression softened slightly, but there was still pain there. You don't owe me an explanation, David. We're just neighbors. Are we? I asked quietly. Just neighbors. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the battle playing out behind her eyes, hope fighting with self-protection, desire wrestling with fear. I don't know what we are, she finally said. I don't know what we're supposed to be. My grandmother would say I should be with someone who understands where I come from, someone who knows the Apache way. And you've been so careful not to let anyone in. I know, I said. I've been afraid. Afraid of getting hurt again, afraid of not being enough, afraid of everything. But Maria, when I saw the look on your face today, when I realized you might care about me the way I care about you, I realized I'm more afraid of losing you than I am of trying. The words hung between us in the doorway, vulnerable and raw. Maria's eyes were shining with tears she wouldn't let fall, and I could see her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the doorframe. You care about me, she whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make it disappear like smoke. I do, I said. I have for a while now. I just didn't know how to say it, or if I should say it. You're incredible, Maria. You're working yourself to exhaustion to chase your dreams, you bring light into everyone's life, and you've somehow managed to make me believe in connection again when I thought that part of me was dead. A tear finally escaped, rolling down her cheek. I've been so confused, she admitted. In my culture, there are expectations. My grandmother raised me with the old teachings after my parents died. She taught me that our Apache identity is sacred, that we have to preserve it. When I started having feelings for you, I felt like I was betraying something important. I would never want you to feel that way, I said quickly. I respect your heritage, Maria. It's part of what makes you who you are. She shook her head. Let me finish. I felt that way at first, but then I talked to my grandmother about it. Do you know what she said? I shook my head, afraid to speak. She said that the Apache way is about honor, respect, and courage. She said that love that makes you want to be better, that respects who you are and where you come from, that takes courage to pursue, that's not betrayal. That's living with an open heart, which is the bravest thing any person can do. Maria smiled through her tears. Then she told me I was being stubborn and afraid, just like my grandfather was before he finally admitted he loved her. I couldn't help but laugh, the tension breaking slightly. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She is. And she's right. I've been afraid too, David. Afraid that if I let myself care about you, you'd eventually leave like everyone else has. Afraid that I'm not enough, that I'm too caught between two worlds to really belong in either one. I reached out and gently took her hand. You're not caught between worlds, Maria. You're building a bridge between them. And you're more than enough. You're extraordinary. She squeezed my hand, and in that moment, something shifted between us, a wall coming down, a door opening, a new beginning emerging from our shared fears and vulnerabilities. So what do we do now? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't exactly been great at relationships. But I'd like to try. If you want to. Maria pulled me into her apartment, closing the door behind us. We sat on her couch, surrounded by the beautiful blend of her life, traditional Apache artwork hanging next to modern nursing textbooks, the smell of sage mixing with coffee, a dream catcher in the window casting shadows over her laptop. If we do this, she said seriously, I need you to understand some things. My heritage isn't just a background detail. It's who I am. There will be ceremonies I need to attend, traditions I need to honor, times when I need to go back to the reservation to be with my family and my people. I understand, I said. And I want to learn. I want to understand where you come from, what's important to you. And I need to know you're not going to run away the first time things get difficult. I need to know you're really ready to open your heart again. I thought about that, really thought about it. Was I ready? Could I promise not to retreat into my shell the first time conflict arose or fear crept in? I can't promise I'll be perfect, I said honestly. I'll probably mess up. I might get scared and start to pull away. But I can promise that I'll try. I can promise that I'll communicate, that I'll be honest, and that I'll fight for us instead of running away. Maria studied my face, searching for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. Then I want to try too. We spent the rest of that evening talking, really talking. Maria told me more about her childhood, about losing her parents in a car accident when she was 12, about her grandmother's strength in raising her alone. She talked about the prejudice she'd faced, both for being Apache in the wider world and for pursuing a career off the reservation in her own community. She shared her dreams of eventually returning to serve her people as a nurse, of being a bridge between traditional healing practices and modern medicine. I opened up too, in ways I hadn't with anyone since my engagement ended. I told her about my ex-fiancée Sarah, about how she'd left me for her colleague, about the humiliation and pain of having a wedding planned and then cancelled. I talked about how I'd shut down after that, how I'd convinced myself that keeping people at a distance was safer than risking that kind of hurt again. But you were just existing, not living, Maria said softly. I've been doing the same thing, telling myself that I was too busy for relationships, that my education and career were enough. But humans need connection. It's not a weakness to need people. When did you become so wise? I asked with a smile. I've always been wise, she teased. You just weren't paying attention. As the evening turned to night, we made plans, real plans. A proper date for the following weekend. Meeting each other's friends. Eventually, when the time was right, me meeting her grandmother and her visiting the reservation with her. I want you to see where I come from, she said. The land, the people, the traditions. I want you to understand the full picture of who I am. I'd be honored, I said, and I meant it. When I finally returned to my own apartment that night, I felt different. Lighter, somehow. The weight I'd been carrying for 2 years, the armor I'd built around my heart, was beginning to lift. I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, thinking about Maria. About her courage in pursuing her dreams despite the obstacles. About her willingness to be vulnerable despite her own fears. About the way she'd somehow seen through my defenses to the person I'd been before pain had closed me off. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Maria, thank you for taking a chance on us. Sweet dreams, David. I smiled in the darkness and typed back, thank you for being patient with me. For seeing something worth waiting for. Sweet dreams, Maria. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I thought about Rachel's words earlier that day. Maybe it was time to be simple again. Not simple in the sense of easy or uncomplicated, but simple in the sense of honest. Honest about my feelings, honest about my fears, honest about wanting to try despite the risk of pain. Love was simple in its essence, even when its execution was complex. You chose someone, and you kept choosing them, day after day, through fear and joy and everything in between. I had chosen Maria. And miraculously, she had chosen me too. 3 months later, I found myself driving through the White Mountains of Arizona with Maria beside me, heading to the reservation for the first time. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel, and I'd changed my shirt twice that morning before we left Phoenix. "You're nervous," Maria observed, amusement in her voice. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "You've been gripping that steering wheel like it might escape." "David, relax. My grandmother is going to love you." "How can you be sure?" "Because I love you," she said simply. "And she trusts my judgment." It was the first time either of us had said those words out loud, though we'd both felt them for weeks. I glanced over at her, this incredible woman who had somehow found me worthy of her heart, and felt my own heart expand in my chest. "I love you too," I said. I should have said it before. "I love you, Maria." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know. I've known. But it's nice to hear it." The reservation was beautiful in a way I hadn't expected, rugged and wild, with pine forests giving way to red rock formations. Maria pointed out landmarks as we drove, telling me stories about her childhood, about her people's history, about the sacred places that held meaning for her tribe. Her grandmother's house was modest but well kept, with a garden full of traditional plants and herbs. As we pulled up, an elderly woman stepped out onto the porch. She was small but carried herself with a dignity that made her seem much larger. Her hair was silver, worn in 2 long braids, and her eyes were the same warm brown as Maria's. "Grandmother." Maria jumped out of the car and ran to embrace her. They spoke in Apache for a moment, and then Maria beckoned me forward. "Grandmother, this is David." I approached respectfully, unsure of the proper protocol. Maria's grandmother studied me for a long moment that felt like an eternity, her dark eyes seeming to see right through me. "So you're the one who's captured my granddaughter's heart," she said in perfect English, a slight smile playing at her lips. "I'm the lucky one," I replied. "She's captured mine." The smile grew. "Come inside. We'll have tea." Over the next few hours, Maria's grandmother, who insisted I call her Naomi, told me stories. Not just about Maria's childhood, but about Apache history, about the struggles her people had faced, about the importance of preserving their culture while also adapting to the modern world. "My granddaughter walks in 2 worlds," Naomi said, pouring me more tea. "This is not easy. For many years, our people were told to forget our language, our customs, our ways. Now we fight to keep them alive." When Maria told me she was falling in love with someone outside our tribe, I worried. I felt my stomach drop, but Naomi continued. "I worried because I love her and want her to be happy. I worried she might lose touch with who she is. But then she told me about you. How you respect her heritage. How you want to learn, not to take, but to understand. How you see all of her, not just the parts that are easy or convenient." "I'm still learning," I said honestly. "But I promise to keep learning. Maria's heritage is part of who she is, and I love all of who she is." Naomi nodded approvingly. "Good. Love is not about making someone smaller to fit into your world. It's about expanding your world to make room for all of who they are." Over the next 2 days, Maria showed me her world. We visited the tribal hospital where she hoped to work someday. We attended a ceremony where I was welcomed as a guest and taught some of the traditional customs. We hiked to sacred sites where Maria felt most connected to her ancestors and her faith. But the most profound moment came on our last evening there. We were sitting around a fire with Naomi and several other tribal elders, sharing a meal. One of the elders, a man named Thomas, asked me what I'd learned from my visit. I thought carefully before answering. I've learned that love isn't about erasing differences, I said. It's about honoring them. I've learned that heritage and tradition aren't chains that bind us to the past, they're roots that keep us grounded while we grow. And I've learned that I have so much more to learn. Thomas nodded, and Naomi smiled at Maria. You chose well, granddaughter. On the drive back to Phoenix, Maria was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Thank you. For what? I asked. For trying. For caring. For not asking me to choose between my culture and my future, between my people and my dreams. For understanding that I can honor where I come from while still building something new. You never have to thank me for that, I said. You deserve someone who sees all of you and loves all of you. So do you, she replied. David, before I met you, I'd convinced myself that I had to do everything alone. That asking for help or letting people in was weakness. You've taught me that there's strength in vulnerability, courage in opening your heart. 6 months after that first conversation in her doorway, I proposed to Maria. Not with a grand gesture or public display, but in a quiet moment on the patio where we'd had so many conversations. I'd worked with a traditional Apache silversmith to create a ring that honored her heritage while celebrating our future. Maria Redhawk, I said, you've taught me that the heart has an infinite capacity to heal, to grow, to love. You've shown me that our pasts don't have to define our futures, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is give someone a chance to know us fully. Will you marry me? She said yes through happy tears, and we spent that evening making plans. We would have 2 ceremonies, one traditional Apache ceremony on the reservation and one in Phoenix for my family and friends. We would build a life that honored both of our backgrounds, that created something new while respecting what came before. Your turn next, I whispered to her as we held each other that night, echoing the words I'd said all those months ago when jealousy had sparked our first real conversation about feelings. My turn for what? She asked. Your turn to know how it feels to be loved completely, to have someone choose you every single day, to be someone's home. She kissed me then, and in that kiss was everything we'd been through, the fear, the vulnerability, the courage, the love. Looking back now, I realized that the day Maria moved in next door was the day my real life began. Before that, I was just going through the motions, existing but not really living. She taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting pain, it means being brave enough to risk it again. She showed me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone who makes you want to be better, braver, more honest. Maria didn't just change my life. She gave me my life back. And that, I learned, is the true power of opening your heart, not despite your fears, but because of them. Because on the other side of fear, on the other side of walls we build to protect ourselves, is the possibility of something beautiful. All it takes is the courage to say yes when someone offers you their heart, and to offer yours in return. The courage to say, your turn next.